Stay tuned. Ahead, I'll talk with New York Times bestselling author Joseph Fender about his new spy thriller, The Oligarch's Daughter. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and this is Some Books Considered. Joseph Fender is the best-selling author of 16 suspense novels, including House on Fire, The Fixer, and Suspicion. 2 of his novels have been adapted into major motion pictures, and 4 more have won the industry's top best novel awards. He joins us to talk about The Oligarch's Daughter. Joseph, welcome to Some Books Considered.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Let's start with this book. Where are you taking readers this time? What's the plot that we're going to see?
Well, it is the story of a regular American guy who falls in love with a woman who turns out to be the daughter of a Russian oligarch, only he doesn't know that for the longest time. And when he discovers that, his life sort of turns upside down. And then American intelligence takes an interest because they want to penetrate the world of this oligarch. And they force him into becoming a spy, which he does not want to do, spy against his own girlfriend and then wife's father-in-law. So it's sort of two things. It is a love story and it is a chase novel.
And you've also got family dynamics in here because Tatyana wants to be her own person. That's why she hid her identity from her boyfriend, is because she wanted to be herself and not be overshadowed by her father.
That's right. She does not want her friends to know that she is incredibly rich. She's a photographer. She wants to appear to be making a living as an artist. She wants to try to make it on her own. And it's very difficult for her, given all her advantages, actually.
So it seems like there are themes of identity in this novel because Paul, who we know as a different name when we first are introduced to him, he's looking for identity as well and establishing who he really is in the aftermath of all this mess.
That's right. We meet him. His name is Grant Anderson. And he's living in a small town in New Hampshire. And he is on the run from somebody, we don't know who. And then some Russians turn up, and there's a violent scene, and he goes on the run. And so we realize fairly soon that Grant is actually Paul Brightman. And Paul is He's a guy who works on Wall Street and happens to meet this woman, this beautiful, interesting photographer named Tatyana, and he gradually falls in love with her. And he is trying to figure out who she is and what their relationship is all about, what the truth is, and takes the course of the book for him to find this out.
And there are questions of trust here. I mean, how much does she really know? And it appears that she really doesn't know a lot. She's kind of lived this privileged but isolated life who doesn't understand everything that her father is into.
Right. That's right. She turns out not to really know what her father is all about. And as Paul discovers the truth, this becomes a real point of difficulty for the two of them, because she doesn't want to hear anything bad about her father, and Paul is finding out things about her father that his daughter does not want to know. So this turns out to be a struggle.
This book also kind of jumps back and forth in time, so the readers sort of get hints and reveals in pieces to tell this whole story. So I'm curious about kind of what challenge that posed for you in putting the story together.
Yeah, it was a challenge. I was writing the book a few years ago. I started writing it, and here's the story of a Russian oligarch and his daughter. And the Russian oligarch, the oligarchs at that time, these Russians who came over, they were billionaires. They bought mansions and yachts and private jets, and they gave philanthropically to hospitals and museums, and they were really merchant princes. And then Russia invaded Ukraine. And all of a sudden, we sanctioned those oligarchs, and they went on the run. We seized their yachts. And the oligarchs went from being these merchant princes to being non-entities, to being non-welcome people in the West. So I thought, man, that's the end of this book. It doesn't work anymore. Until I realized I could do two timelines. And one would be set 6 years ago when Paul meets this woman, and one is set today after this war has broken out, when Paul is on the run. So I was able to, so what I wrote these two timelines. I wrote each one of them separately. And then I was faced with the challenge of bringing them together in the book, sort of knitting them together so that you'd move from the past to the present, from the past to the present, and it would still make sense to the reader. And that was difficult. That took some engineering, but I think it worked out okay.
And now that the book has come out, things have continued to shift in terms of oligarchs. And we have oligarch, maybe some people never even heard that term before. Now it's on their lips. We have concerns about Russian influence and the role of oligarchs, whether they be Russian oligarchs or American oligarchs. So there's a lot of different kind of discussions. So it seems like this topic is very relevant to our times.
Yes. When I wrote the book and we published it, my editor and I talked a bit about whether I should use that title, The Oligarch's Daughter, because did people know what that word meant? And now all of a sudden, after Joe Biden gave his farewell speech warning about the rise of American oligarchy in the United States, people began to sort of figure out that word. And it turns out that we've got oligarchs here too. Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, and of course Elon Musk, just to name three of them. And what I learned that was interesting is that the oligarchs in the United States are actually more powerful than the oligarchs in Russia. The oligarchs in the US have a great political power. In Russia, they do not exert that power because Putin was sort of elected by these oligarchs in Russia. And then after he took power, he called them in. He called a meeting of the richest men in Russia into the Kremlin and told them, you want to keep your fortunes, you want to keep your yachts and your mansions, etc. Stay in your lane. Do not get involved in politics. Do not oppose me. And as long as you stay out of politics, you'll be okay. But if you get involved, there will be consequences. And to prove his point, he arrested the richest man in Russia, put him on trial, and sent him to the Gulag for 10 years. So the other oligarchs got the point very quickly. Stay out of politics. So the Russian oligarchs are not involved in politics anymore.
I'm talking with Joseph Finder about The Oligarch's Daughter, and our conversation continues in a moment. If you're enjoying this discussion, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. And thank you. Well, you had to do a lot of research for this book, and one aspect of it was researching oligarchs. So tell us a bit about that research and what you were able to use in your novel and what surprised you the most during that research.
Well, yeah, I talked to a number of people. I won't say they call themselves oligarchs. I mean, nobody wants to call themselves an oligarch anyway. But I talked to people who I considered to be oligarch adjacent. They worked for oligarchs or worked with them or were related to them. And I heard all kinds of stories about the vast wealth that these people have. I was able to track down a captain of a super yacht who works often for Russian oligarchs, captains their yachts. And he told me all kinds of stories about the oligarchs he works for and the evidence of their wealth, which is extraordinary. I mean, Some of these people they've got tanks full of lobsters on their yachts, for example. And some of them have in their yachts submarines in which they would take their guests out to see the bottom of the sea. And it's that sort of thing that surprised me, that these people were that wealthy and were willing to show it off.
Another thing in your book is that it happens in different locations. Obviously, some of it in Russia and the United States. And you have to get those details right, because no doubt there'll be some readers somewhere that'll say, no, that's wrong. You didn't get that right. I've been there. So what kind of research did that, challenge for you?
Yeah, so I have been to Moscow a number of times, but I needed to get the details right about what Moscow is like today. And I talked to a number of Russians who live in Moscow or recently lived there. I talked to Americans who had visited there. I did a lot of research to sort of make the Moscow scene in the book as a sequence sort of as real and genuine as possible. I sort of believe that you don't want to give the reader too many details from research. It's sort of like an iceberg. You only want to see the top 10% in research. But you want to give just enough details so that it feels real, it feels authentic to the reader. So I talked to people who were involved in the financial industry. I talked to Russians who were involved. I talked to people in Moscow. I talked to FBI agents and CIA agents about the spy business to try to get those details as right as possible.
Now, this is obviously sort of an action, adventure, spy novel. But beyond being just a really engaging read, are there any kind of overarching takeaways or points you hope that your readers will ponder after finishing the book?
Well, sure. I want them to sort of think about what our relationship with Russia is really all about. Are we allies, as some people claim today? Are we adversaries? And if we're adversaries, in what way are we adversaries? What is our relationship like? And I think it's more complex than we give it credit for. I think there's a lot going on. I also want us to sort of realize that Russians are really so very appealing people, on a personal level. Paul falls in love with Tatyana and her family, and he loves the food and the culture and the holidays and the sense of humor. I love Russians myself. I've been there a number of times and really have got a number of Russian friends. And I wanted people to see that even if Russia is our adversary, Russians are friendly with us.
There's a question I like to ask authors of fiction, and it's this. If you could spend a day in real life with one of the characters from your novel, who would it be and why?
I would want to spend time with my oligarch, Arkady Galkin, because I found him to be a very deep and interesting character and surprising. And I would like to know where he came from, how he got so rich, and how he stays alive.
I'm curious. Now you have this book out here. What are you working on now? What's next for you?
I'm working on another novel now that is the beginning of a series involving a couple of retired CIA officers who investigate cases in the real world after their term is up. And I'm enjoying it a lot. I think people will like it too.
The novel is The Oligarch's Daughter by Joseph Fender. Joseph, thank you for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me. This is a great conversation.
If you'd like to purchase The Oligarch's Daughter, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. I'm Dan Skinner. Thank you for watching this edition of Some Books Considered.